Hey, welcome. My name is Dan Gertrudes, and I got Steven Byler here with me. Today, we're kicking off the FaaS Evolution podcast series. FaaS stands for Finance as a Service, and our goal as a company, as management team, we're looking to transform the accounting industry. We're not CPAs, we're not accountants. This whole business was, quite foreign to us. But we soon identified an opportunity. The average small, medium-sized business and venture-backed company, they lacked the capability and the know-how around developing and executing on their accounting and finance value stream. Now, there's this whole industry, this accounting industry, that is in the midst of a major seismic shift in how they're looking at providing their services to their customers. The notion of having your accountant connecting with you once, twice, maybe if you're lucky, 4 times a year, ultimately that's not adding the recurring, ongoing needed value that our small, medium-sized businesses really need. And so we started this podcast series to start transforming the accounting industry, where we're interviewing thought leaders in our industry to ultimately help you, the accountant, the CPA, the bookkeeper, and the part-time fractional CFO move from that transactional, never mind the hourly billable mindset, to more of that finance as a service. FaaS is the future of the accounting industry. All right, Steve. So today we're kicking off a new series that we're calling the FaaS Evolution. Steve, what is FaaS?
FaaS is finance as a service. It is a way of looking at delivering value to customers in the accounting and finance space in a way that I don't think a lot of people look at finance and accounting as finance as a service.
Right. And so that is definitely one way to look at it from the lens of the industry. The other way to look at it, of course, is from the lens of our customers, the companies that we serve, whether you're a startup, venture backed, solo entrepreneur, small, medium sized business, you've been operating for the last 30 years. At some level, you need a finance and accounting function. And FaaS, at least from my perspective, I view it as a way to outsource, but yet feel as if those functions are being insourced in the company. And so, Steve, you brought up the accounting industry. So why put the effort into a new series? Obviously, we have the raw take for CEOs. It's been successful. We're seeing a ton of traction. Why FaaS Evolution, and why now?
Yeah, so we found ourselves on the Raw Take talking to both our customers, which was the initial audience of the Raw Take for CEOs. We also found ourselves increasingly talking to the accounting and finance industry, and that worked. We had a good dynamic on the Raw Take, but we did feel like increasingly what we were talking about finance as a service, about how we have built our finance as a service offering to the market, that it was relatively unique in some ways, and that people were eager for that content, people in the accounting space. So we are starting the FaaS Evolution, and we chose the name FaaS Evolution because we do feel like the accounting industry and the finance industry is in a state of evolution and needs to really go through a few iterations to get to a place where, especially for the startup and small business customers, to really evolve what you're doing for those customers and how you're delivering that service to really add value.
So I remember a time, I want to say probably now 7 or 8 years ago. So obviously I came from a different background than you did. You started in the startup world. So from your perspective, I remember exchanging stories with you. Your startup, you guys had outsourced accounting. You had your CPA for tax. You probably didn't have a CFO because both you and your co-founder were financially savvy and understood the importance of planning. Not to mention that the company that you guys formed was very much of a consultative mindset. But the background I came from, all of that stuff was kind of in-house. Maybe the only thing that was obviously out of the house was auditors, right? For independence, for obvious reasons. But 7 or 8 years ago, when I pitched this idea of this accounting and finance value stream, right, and how the importance of continuity and how accounting feeds planning and planning feeds business strategy, and then
Yep.
it sort of starts all over again.
Yeah.
What is it about finance as a service that gives our peers a competitive advantage over, say, maybe your typical local yokel CPA, where you're only really connecting with your CPA for tax reasons, or maybe they're doing your bookkeeping for just like making their tax prep life easier.
Sure. Yeah. No. It's a good point. I think we're touching our customers at least twice a month. If not once a week, especially in the first 2-3 months that they're our customers on the FaaS side of the business. At that point, we're talking to them once a week because we're really getting to know their business much deeper. But once we get to a regular cadence, we're talking to them at least twice a month, if not more. And when you're engaging with your customers at that level, it's so much different than the once twice a year kind of CPA touch, so to speak. But I think we're even different than the average outsourced CFO or fractional CFO. But from a CPA standpoint, generally you're leading with compliance, and while we do have some tax in-house, we don't lead with compliance because compliance is something, it's more of a necessary evil, right? What business owner wants to do compliance? They rather drive growth, right?
Who wants to actually be a 1040 sweatshop?
Yeah, I mean, some people love that stuff, and that's what they go to market with, and it's a needed service, but it's not one that drives value. It's one that mitigates risk. And in all of our the way that we go to market, we want to drive value for our customers.
So, what do you think gives finance as a service firms the competitive advantage? Like, what's that key thing? And look back to your experience 12, 15 years ago in your first startup.
Yeah, I think it really is that finance as a service firms are with you in the process, and they become part of your team. And whether that is simply an outsourcing of accounting, you are going to rely on them to do the accounting, right? And you're going to, what they're going to do every month, and you expect that they're going to deliver, and then you're going to use whatever they deliver in your business process.
And
It's
we're
it's
not
not
doing accounting to make your tax prep life easier.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
not
not.
transactional, right? Transactional is very much okay. You did it, you're done, and we both go on with our lives. FaaS is really, we are not done ever unless you terminate as a customer. We are in this with you until you grow to a point where you need those in-house resources yourself, and I worked myself out of a job.
And of course, we help fill those positions, define those positions, because we've been there since day one in many cases, developing those processes, those
Hmm.
procedures, those systems. So it is very much a symbiotic relationship. And so it's all too easy to sell transactional services, especially when they're compliance focused. You got to do it, so you got to pay somebody to do it. How do companies, and we're going to get back to this momentarily, but how do companies like ours, or even your average CPA or accountant or bookkeeper, or to boot your fractional CFO that's on the zone, how do they sell what we do, this sort of like cradle to business strategy range of services and value?
So I think it's one thing to sell strategy, right? And a CFO who has been in various businesses, has tremendous experience, 20, 30, 40 years of experience. They've got a lot of value to add to small businesses and startups. There's a lot that they can do. And that is not the model from day one. Our earliest conversations, Dan, was not, let's find ways to be a fractional CFO. We wanted to find ways even before we defined it as finance as a service. We wanted to find ways to be in it with our customers and more of an on-demand, very agile service to our customers. And when you're one person, two people, or just a CFO shop, like matching up one CFO to one company, you can't be that agile, and that's a challenge for them to sell what we do. I think the thing that really always gets me jazzed about what we do and how we do it is that we took our time to build this finance as a service in our company. It was you, it was me, it was Corey before we started hiring young talent to be able to drive, 80, 90% of the value for customers that they would get out of a CFO. And how do you drive 80 to 90% of value that you would get out of a CFO? The CFO has 30 years of experience.
Keep
And
them
the
out of the books.
young analyst has like 2 years of experience. How do you do that? But it's about comes down for us cadence, rigor, and team, right, Dan?
Yeah. Keeping the CFO out of your general ledger is probably step one. It's like rule number one. Don't let CFOs and CPAs, your tax accountant, in your books. Let the professionals, your bookkeeper, right, your accountant. There should be segregation of duties. We're big believers in that. It's just like I don't want the bookkeeper in my financial models, right? And so as we're kind of going through this process, Steve, what is it about today that makes sense that we're at the cusp of the finance as a service evolution, revolution, this shift from very transactional mindset of human, delivering of human capital to more of a systematized approach and a more encompassing, not just scale, but I'm talking scope from the daily nuts and bolts of bookkeeping, your fiscal monthly controllership, your financial planning analysis, your CFO, and then ultimately capstoning it with your tax. And by the way, tax shouldn't just be an annual thing. It really should be a quarterly check-in, a quarterly strategy.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of things pushing the industry, pushing business to want more out of finance and accounting. So the question is why now? Why is there a FaaS evolution right now? Or why do we feel like there's a move to this? Because we've been in this space for 8 years, right? So we've been part of this and we've seen growth in our space. But I think that's part of it is that we've seen the adoption of business owners and founders leveraging more and more of what we do, not only for our business, but in our direct competitors, which we don't feel like we compete with them. We compete with business as usual, and as we've seen over the last 8 years, there is less of that business as usual. Whether that's because of a pandemic, whether that's because traditional CPAs are kind of retiring, and whether that's there's a myriad of issues or what things that are happening that make now the time that we're seeing a move in the space, both from the accounting industry and from the demand side, the businesses moving to expecting more and wanting more engagement out of their partners, outsourced partners.
Yeah, and I look back over the years, and people would ask me, why are you getting into accounting? Oh, you're an accountant. No, not an accountant.
Right.
I'm not a CPA. I didn't come from that world. I don't feel like I'm a mercenary. I don't feel like I'm charging by the hour. I really want to, always have wanted to be that extension of the management team, regardless if you're talking about the debits and credits and nuts and bolts of bookkeeping to more higher level annual strategic business cycle and layering in employee compensation in your annual operating plans and the liquidity needs of your long range plan. I've always felt, and maybe it's me coming in as an outsider, and maybe now I'm sort of like stomping my feet a little bit. But part of the reason for the FaaS Evolution podcast is the more I have conversations with more traditional accountants or even traditional fractional part time CFOs, everybody thinks like that, yes, you should be an expert at what you do, but if the value proposition can go beyond just that one individual and then layering on things like business continuity, disaster recovery. So if there's anything coming out of the pandemic here is like these companies need to plan. companies, generally speaking, need to elevate their disaster recovery and business continuity foresight. They're not thinking about these things. The black swan, it's real shit. Like, this shit can really happen. And maybe it's not a pandemic, but it could be another recession. It could be employees leaving through the great resignation of 2021, which we've talked a lot about recently. So I feel like now is the time to start talking more to the market, but this isn't sort of the aha moment, at least for me, and I can speak for us. This isn't about the aha moment we were right, because we're far from being right. We're still a fractional of the size of a top 20 CPA accounting firm. Our goal, of course, is to be in that 8-digit sort of realm over the next few years. It's about helping the business advisor. It's about helping the bookkeeping, the accounting folks, the 2 to 5 person shop, up to 10 people shop. I mean, I recently came back from a conference and it was tethered with these smaller boutique type firms, and the same thing resonated. We're tired, we're overworked, the customers don't appreciate what we're doing, we're not getting paid for it, and there is a balance, right? And I think what I want out of the FaaS Evolution podcast is to speak to those folks to say, if you take a step back and start thinking about your business, everything from the nuts and bolts of the like revenue operations, marketing, the product or service you're providing, and how you're selling that value proposition. And then lastly, and more importantly too, is how you're producing day in and day out, month in and month out, across different capabilities. Remember, someone who's really good at debits and credits, someone who's really good at QuickBooks, chances are being in that sort of blue sky, that long range planning, that strategic thinking, it's probably not in their DNA. And by the way, that's okay, right? And thinking about that production and how to hire for it and manage and grow and mentor, develop those team members is also at the top of my mind. And I'll end it with this. We do what we do, and you mentioned cadence and rigor and the team, and we talk a lot about that. But also, one of the overarching themes is like your tech stack, embracing your tech stack. And so part of this podcast are going to be interviews with some of our industry's thought leaders.
I do feel strongly that it is an evolution or a revolution, and we do feel that we have been able to grow this in a unique way. And I think one of the strengths that we've had that some of these smaller firms don't have is that we are not CPAs. The CPAs that are on their own or have that 5, 6, 10, 12 person shop, those are like a little bit of the outliers, right? Because they're the ones that are entrepreneurial enough, embrace risk enough to go out there and do it, right? And to your point, like they probably feel like it's in their DNA to help these businesses grow. But the average debit and credit, called bean counter, is not that embracing of risk. Is not, it does take a different type of person to be able to help business owners manage through growth than
And
it
I
does.
don't think it can be just one person. I think that's part of the theme here, right? Finance as a service cannot be bookmarked in one person. It's impossible. And if you're doing it, great, but at some point you're going to be capped at your own capacity. Finance as a service to me is very much about stratifying out that accounting, that finance, business strategy, that function within these companies, and allocating the right capability resource in conjunction with the optimal capacity that's needed, overlaying processes, systems, and technologies. And if you can do that across that entire function, that to me is a finance as a service. And it's not just about the value that one individual brings to the table, but
For
the
sure.
value that the entire function, the entire service that covers those 3 or 4 areas brings to the table. And that is the FaaS evolution. It is moving from that transactional to that monthly recurring service. And of course, for practice owners, because this podcast is really earmarked for practice owners or practitioners, sole practitioners. I've met many throughout the years, and they have taken the risk to leave behind the ivory tower to start this on their own. It's not easy. But one of the things I see that is a common theme, even with those individuals, and by the way, we're not just, you see that in entrepreneurship, right? People tend to start companies because they have a hard skill in a particular industry or they have the contacts. Helping those individuals come to the realization that they can't do everything, one, and two, the people you knew from your past, that capability, that may not be the right core competencies you need in the future to build your finance as a service firm. Because we talk a lot, especially on the Raw Take for CEOs, we talk about RevOps, we talk about marketing. I mean, when we talk about our own core competencies in our business, that trifecta, right, that Venn diagram that we always throw around, yeah, financial management, it's a catch-all for everything between accounting and finance, tax, strategy, right? That's got to be a core finance of any FaaS firm. But beyond that, you begin to focus on a few other core competencies. At least for us, Steve, people are front and center. Like, you got to have that HR people mindset, because this, at the end of the day, you can throw all the tech and systems and processes. It's still a people business, and people come and go. People have needs, right? So HR, people, definitely that second core competency. And of course, I would say in our business, because we've gotten pretty damn good at this, it is the RevOps, the inbound marketing, the digital marketing. Like, for us, digital marketing has become a core competency. And, frankly, we've got like 4 or 5 team members that focus on that side of the business.
Yeah, it is a different type of person that you need to find and replicate and build the competency around it. And we've done that with our team, and we want to be able to pass on some of those learnings to other firm owners.
And so the FaaS Evolution, a new podcast, it is hosted by GrowthLab FaaS, Finance as a Service. We're interviewing thought leaders in our industry to ultimately help you, the accountants, you, the CPAs, the bookkeepers, and even the part-time fractional CFOs, helping you move your practice, your business, regardless of size, to more of that FaaS mindset, moving away from that transactional tick list mindset and looking at the holistic needs of your customers, our market segment, regardless if you're in construction or you're in medical devices or you're venture backed or you're on the flip side looking at restructuring, right? These companies, they need more than just a transactional service provider. They need a company that can take on everything from the bookkeeping all the way through financial management, financial strategy, business strategy. And so we're excited for this. Steve, do you have any final thoughts before we move on to part 2?
Just join us. We'll be releasing these, and if you have topics or things you want us to focus on, let us know.
Yeah, and our second guest is going to be Martin from Giraffe. That will be exciting. We're big proponents of systematizing and productizing the FP&A component of our service offerings. And we're going to be talking a lot more about the big why. Why is that important? And so looking forward to more of this. Thanks, Steve. So that's this week's FaaS Evolution. We really do appreciate you joining us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at growthlabfinancial.com.